Jake Murphy woke up at 5 in the morning, just like he had for the past 20 years. His body moved without thinking. Get up, make coffee, check the news. The same routine that kept him sane since he came back from the wars. The small apartment felt too quiet. Back when he was Colonel Murphy, leading the 7th Marine Force across 3 star systems, quiet meant danger. Now it just meant another empty day ahead of him. He poured his coffee and sat at the kitchen table. The morning news played on his old screen. The reporter talked about budget cuts and peace dividends. Jake turned up the volume when he heard the word military. President Hayes announced today that veteran benefits will be reduced by 60%, the reporter said. The president believes these cuts are necessary to fund civilian programs that benefit all Americans, not just former soldiers. Jake's hand tightened around his coffee cup. 60%. That would barely cover his rent. His phone buzzed. A text from Lisa Stone. Did you see the news? Jake typed back. Yeah. We need to talk. Lisa had been the best pilot in the Falcon Squadron. She could fly anything with wings or engines through asteroid fields that would kill most people. Now she lived 2 blocks away and fixed old cars for a living. No one wanted to hire a fighter pilot when there were no more fights. Jake walked to Tony's store around noon. Tony Rodriguez ran a military surplus shop downtown. It was the only place where old soldiers still felt welcome. The bell rang when Jake pushed open the door. You heard? Tony asked without looking up from his inventory. Hard to miss, Jake said. 60%. Tony was a big man with scars on his arms from the Battle of Kepler Station. He had held a choke point for 6 hours against alien forces while civilians escaped. Now he sold old uniforms and camping gear to teenagers who thought war was a game. Lisa's coming by later, Tony said. So is Amy. Dr. Amy Foster had saved more lives than Jake could count. She pulled wounded soldiers out of burning ships and patched them up under enemy fire. The government gave her a medal and a pension. Now they wanted to take half of it away. The store door opened, and a young man in an expensive suit walked in. He looked around like he was visiting a museum. His eyes stopped on Jake's old service jacket hanging on the wall. Excuse me, the young man said. Are you the owner? That's me, Tony replied. I'm from the Veterans Transition Program, the man said, pulling out a tablet. We're here to help former military personnel adjust to civilian life. I see you're still focused on your past service. Jake watched Tony's face change. The same look he got right before a battle. Adjust to what? Tony asked. Modern society, the man said. The war is over. It's time to move forward. We have programs to help you retrain for useful civilian jobs. This is a useful job, Jake said. The young man looked at him. Are you a veteran too? Former Colonel Jake Murphy, 7th Marine Expeditionary Force. Ah. The man made notes on his tablet. Colonel Murphy, you commanded troops in violent conflicts across multiple star systems. That kind of experience doesn't translate well to peaceful civilian work. Jake felt something cold in his chest. Those violent conflicts kept Earth safe. That's debatable, the man said. Many experts believe diplomatic solutions would have worked just as well. The important thing now is helping people like you move past those traumatic experiences. Lisa walked in as the man was talking. She stopped when she saw the suit and the tablet. What's this about? She asked. Veterans Transition Program, the man said. Are you Lisa Stone? Former fighter pilot. Captain Lisa Stone, she said. Right. Ms. Stone, our records show you've been unemployed for 8 months. We have openings for delivery drivers and warehouse workers. Much safer than your previous occupation. Lisa stared at him. Safer than what? Flying military aircraft in combat situations. Very dangerous work. Not suitable for long-term employment. Tony stepped forward. Maybe you should leave. I'm just trying to help, the man said. The government wants to ensure all veterans receive proper support during this transition period. What transition? Jake asked. From military to civilian thinking. From violence to peace. From the past to the future. The man smiled like he was talking to children. Some of you are having trouble letting go of old habits. Amy Foster pushed through the door, still wearing her nurse uniform from the hospital. She looked tired. She always looked tired these days. Sorry I'm late, she said. Then she saw the man in the suit. Who's this? Someone who was just leaving, Tony said. The man put away his tablet. I'll be back next week with some forms for you to fill out. The transition is mandatory for all veterans receiving government benefits. After he left, the four friends stood in silence. Mandatory, Amy said finally. Did you see his tablet? Lisa asked. He was taking notes on everything we said. Jake walked to the window and watched the man get into a black car. Two other men in suits sat in the front seats. They're watching us, he said. Who's they? Tony asked. Good question, Jake replied. Amy sat down on an old ammo crate. The hospital administrator called me in today. Said they were reviewing all employees with military backgrounds, making sure we fit the hospital's peaceful environment. Peaceful environment, Lisa repeated. That's what the car dealer said. When he fired me, said customers might be uncomfortable around former combat pilots. Tony locked the front door and turned the sign to closed. Something's happening. This isn't just budget cuts. Jake nodded. The cuts are real, but they're part of something bigger. That kid didn't care about helping us find jobs. He was collecting information. About what? Amy asked. About us. What we do. Where we go. Who we talk to. Lisa checked her phone. I've been getting friend requests on social media. People I don't know. All civilian profiles, but they ask a lot of questions about my service record. Same here, Tony said. Amy pulled out her tablet and showed them a news article. Look at this. Are veterans a threat to peaceful society? Published yesterday. Jake read the headline. The article talked about former soldiers who couldn't adapt to civilian life. It mentioned violent tendencies and outdated thinking. It suggested that veterans needed closer supervision. Someone's building a case against us, he said. For what? Tony asked. I don't know yet. But 20 years ago, when aliens were shooting at us, we were heroes. Now that there's peace, we're problems to be solved. Lisa stood up. So what do we do? Jake looked at his three friends. Tony, who held off an entire alien regiment. Lisa, who flew suicide missions and came back alive. Amy, who worked 18-hour days, saving lives under fire. They weren't problems. They were the reason Earth was still free. We find out who's behind this, he said, and we remind them why they shouldn't underestimate old soldiers. Outside, the black car was still parked across the street. The men inside were watching the store and taking notes. Director Stephen Clark stood in his glass office on the 40th floor, looking down at the city below. Everything looked peaceful from up here. Clean streets, people going about their business. No soldiers marching around with weapons. This was what civilization looked like. Sir, we have the veteran surveillance reports. His assistant Helen Brooks said as she entered the office. Helen was young, smart, and believed in their mission. She had written her college thesis on how military cultures damaged peaceful societies. Stephen had recruited her personally. What did we learn? Stephen asked, turning from the window. They're organizing, Helen said, placing files on his desk. The Murphy group met yesterday at the Rodriguez surplus store. They stayed after hours and kept the door locked. Stephen nodded. This was expected. Veterans always tried to stick together when challenged. It was part of their tribal mentality. Any violence? He asked. Not yet, but our psychological profiles suggest it's only a matter of time. Stephen picked up one of the files. Jake Murphy's photo stared back at him, a hard face with cold eyes. The kind of man who solved problems with force. Colonel Murphy led assault forces in 7 major battles, Stephen read aloud, responsible for the deaths of thousands of enemy combatants. He's a killer, Helen said. They all are. That's what makes them dangerous in a peaceful society. Stephen believed this completely. Men like Murphy were trained to destroy things. When there was nothing left to destroy, they became threats to the very people they once protected. What about the pilot? Stone. Former Captain Lisa Stone. She flew bombing missions against alien colonies, destroyed entire settlements from orbit. And Rodriguez, infantry specialist, expert in urban warfare and close combat. His methods were considered brutal, even by military standards. Stephen closed the file. These people had been useful once, when Earth needed killers to fight aliens. But the wars were over. Humanity had won. Now these same killers walked among peaceful civilians, carrying their violent skills like hidden weapons. Sir, Helen said, we've received approval for Phase 2. Stephen smiled. Phase 2 would solve the veteran problem permanently. The Civilian Defense Initiative had been his idea. After studying history, Stephen realized that every peaceful society eventually fell to its own military. Soldiers always thought they knew better than civilians. They always believed force was the answer. Not this time. Have we identified all veteran gathering places? Stephen asked. Yes, sir. Rodriguez's store, Murphy's apartment building, 3 bars, downtown, and a gym on 5th Street. We're monitoring all of them. Good. What about their communications? We're tracking their phones and social media. They're not using secure channels yet, but our experts believe they will soon. Stephen walked back to the window. Far below, people lived normal lives. They went to work, raised families, solved problems with words instead of weapons. This was worth protecting. His phone buzzed. Sir, we have a visitor. Lieutenant Commander. Mike Davis wants to see you. Stephen frowned. Davis wasn't on his appointment schedule. Send him up? 5 minutes later, Mike Davis walked into the office. He was younger than the other veterans, maybe 35. He wore a clean suit and looked professional. Director Clark, Mike said, extending his hand. Thank you for seeing me, Commander Davis. What brings you here? I wanted to discuss the veteran situation, Mike said, sitting down without being invited. I think there might be some misunderstandings. Stephen studied him. Davis looked nervous, which was good. It meant the pressure was working. What kind of misunderstandings? The benefit cuts, the surveillance, the transition programs. Some veterans are getting the wrong idea about the government's intentions. And what idea is that? Mike shifted. In his chair. They think someone wants to eliminate them. Stephen laughed. That's paranoid thinking. Classic military mindset. Everything's a threat. Everyone's an enemy. Maybe. But paranoid people can be dangerous if they feel cornered. Is that a threat, Commander? No, sir. It's a warning. Jake Murphy isn't just any veteran. He's a tactical genius. Lisa Stone can outfly anyone you have. Tony Rodriguez knows urban warfare better than your entire security force. Stephen leaned back in his chair. Are you trying to scare me, Commander? I'm trying to prevent a problem. These people aren't criminals. They're heroes who served their country. If you push them too hard, they might push back. Let them push, Stephen said. We have laws, courts, police. This isn't some alien battlefield where might makes right. Mike stood up. You don't understand what you're dealing with. I understand perfectly. I'm dealing with people who can't adapt to peace. People who see violence as the solution to every problem. People who think their military service gives them special rights. These people saved Earth. These people did a job. Now that job is over. It's time for them to step aside and let civilians run civilization. Mike walked to the door, then stopped. Director Clark, I hope you're right about this. I really do. Because if you're wrong, a lot of people are going to get hurt. After Mike left, Stephen turned to Helen. Add Davis to the watch list. He's more sympathetic to his old friends than I thought. Yes, sir. Should we move to Phase 2 now? Stephen considered this. The veterans were organizing. That was clear. They were starting to ask questions and make connections. Soon they would figure out the scope of the operation. Not yet. Let them gather their little group first. It will be easier to deal with them all at once. What if they run? Where would they go? This is Earth. This is their home. They won't abandon it. Stephen was counting on that. Veterans had an emotional attachment to the places they protected. It made them predictable. His computer chimed with a new message. Security footage from the Rodriguez store showed the 4 veterans meeting again. This time they had been joined by 3 others, including a woman Stephen didn't recognize. Who's the new one? He asked Helen. Helen checked her tablet. Mary Campbell, former communications specialist. She handled encrypted battlefield networks during the Centauri Wars. Stephen nodded. A communications expert would be a problem if the veterans decided to go underground. But it also meant they were getting scared. Scared people made mistakes. Increased surveillance on all of them. He ordered. I want to know everything they do, everyone they talk to, everywhere they go. Sir, what if they detect the surveillance? They will eventually. Murphy's too smart not to notice. When they do, they'll either run or fight. And if they fight, Stephen smiled. Then we'll have all the justification we need for Phase 3. Helen looked confused. I thought Phase 2 was the final phase. Phase 2 removes their benefits and legal protections. Phase 3 removes them. Removes them how? However necessary, Stephen said. These people are weapons. Helen, you don't reform weapons. You don't retrain them. You dispose of them before they hurt innocent people. Outside his window, the sun was setting over the peaceful city. Soon, Stephen thought, it would be truly peaceful. No more veterans walking the streets with their violent memories. No more trained killers hiding among the civilian population. Just normal people living normal lives. Protected by proper civilian authorities who understood that words were stronger than weapons. His phone rang. The caller ID showed a blocked number. Director Clark, speaking. This is Commander Davis. I wanted to give you one more chance to reconsider your approach. I thought we settled this earlier, Commander. The veterans know they're being watched. They know about the benefit cuts and the transition programs, but they don't know about Phase 2 yet. Stephen felt cold. How do you know about Phase 2? I know a lot of things, Director, including the fact that you're being funded by people who don't have Earth's best interests at heart. The line went dead. Stephen stared at the phone. How could Davis know about the funding? That information was classified at the highest levels. Helen? He called. We're moving to Phase 2 immediately. Jake woke up to the sound of boots in his hallway. Heavy boots, moving fast, trying to be quiet, but failing. He rolled out of bed and grabbed the pistol from his nightstand. Old habits never died. He pressed his back against the bedroom wall and listened. At least 6 men outside his door. Maybe more in the stairwell. They were good, but not good enough. Jake had been hearing enemy footsteps for 20 years. His phone buzzed with a text from Mike Davis. They're coming for all of us. Get out now. Jake moved to his window and looked down. Black vans surrounded his building. Men in tactical gear were setting up a perimeter. These weren't regular police. Someone knocked on his door. Colonel Murphy, this is the Federal Veterans Task Force. We need to talk to you. Jake almost laughed. Federal Veterans Task Force. Stephen Clark wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Just a minute, Jake called out. He was already getting dressed. The building had a fire escape on the back side. Jake had checked it when he moved in, like he checked everything. You never knew when you might need a quick exit. The knocking got louder. Colonel Murphy, Please open the door. Jake climbed out his window onto the fire escape. The metal was cold under his hands. Below, he could see two guards watching the alley. They were looking at the street, not up at the building. Mistake number one. Jake moved down the fire escape slowly. When he was directly above the guards, he dropped. His feet hit the first guard's shoulders, driving him to the ground. The second guard turned, reaching for his weapon. Jake's fist connected with the man's jaw before he could draw. Both guards were unconscious in under 10 seconds. Jake checked their equipment. Military-grade weapons, body armor, communications gear. These weren't civilian law enforcement officers. They were soldiers. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Tony. Lisa's building is surrounded too. Amy's in custody. Jake cursed. They had moved fast, but not fast enough. At least 3 of his friends were in danger. He made his way through the alley toward Tony's store. The streets were quiet. Too quiet. It was 7 in the morning, but there were no people around. No traffic. No normal city sounds. Jake stayed in the shadows, moving from building to building. His old training kicked in. Check corners, watch windows, listen for anything unusual. The city had become a battlefield. 2 blocks from Tony's store, Jake saw the roadblock. Military vehicles stretched across the street. Soldiers in full combat gear checked every car and person trying to pass. Jake smiled. Stephen Clark thought he was dealing with criminals who would run and hide. He didn't understand that he was dealing with soldiers who knew how to fight back. Jake circled around the roadblock, using side streets and alleys. He had memorized every route in his neighborhood years ago, another old habit that was paying off now. Tony's store was dark, but Jake knew Tony was inside. The old sergeant had probably seen the roadblocks and prepared for a siege. Jake found the back entrance to the building. Tony had shown it to him months ago. A hidden door behind a dumpster that led to the store's basement. He knocked 3 times, paused, then knocked twice. Tony's voice came through the door. Password, Kepler Station. Jake replied. The door opened. Tony stood there with a shotgun in his hands and a grin on his face. Took you long enough, Tony said. Jake followed him into the basement. The room was full of military equipment, weapons, ammunition, communication gear, body armor. Tony had been preparing for this day. How many are out there? Jake asked. At least 50 around my building. More at the roadblocks. Tony handed Jake a rifle. They think they have us trapped. Where are the others? Lisa's holed up in the old aircraft hangar on the east side. She managed to get out before they surrounded her building. Mike Davis is at the communication center downtown. What about Amy? Tony's face darkened. They got her at the hospital. Arrested her in front of her patients. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. Amy had never hurt anyone except to defend others. She was a healer, not a fighter. We're getting her back, he said. Damn right we are. Tony checked his weapons. But first we need to even the odds. Jake looked at the military equipment around them. How much of this stuff do you have? Enough to outfit a squad, Tony replied. I've been collecting it for years. Call it paranoia, but it looks like I was right to be paranoid. Jake's phone rang. The number was blocked, but he answered anyway. Colonel Murphy, this is Director Clark. Stephen, I was wondering when you'd call. I'm calling to offer you a chance to surrender peacefully. You're surrounded and outnumbered. There's no need for anyone to get hurt. Jake laughed. You already hurt someone. Dr. Foster never did anything to you. Dr. Foster is being held for her own protection. Some veterans are considered dangerous. Dangerous? To who? To civilians? To peaceful society? To themselves? Jake looked at Tony, who was loading ammunition into magazines. You know what's really dangerous, Stephen? Underestimating people you don't understand. I understand you perfectly. Colonel, you're a soldier without a war. You're looking for enemies where none exist. Am I? Then why are you using military tactics against civilians? Why are there soldiers on my streets instead of police? Stephen was quiet for a moment. Because regular police aren't trained to handle people with your skills. And what skills are those? Killing skills, Colonel. You're all killers. Jake ended the call. Stephen Clark really didn't understand what he was dealing with. What's the plan? Tony asked. Jake thought about it. They were outnumbered and surrounded. Their friends were scattered or captured. Any normal group would surrender or try to run, but they weren't normal people. They were veterans of 1,000 wars. They had faced worse odds against alien armies and won. First, we rescue Amy, Jake said. Then we find out who's really behind this. How do we get past 50 soldiers? Jake smiled. The same way we got past alien armies. We don't fight them where they're strong. We fight them where they're weak. He moved to Tony's computer and pulled up a map of the city. The detention center where they were holding Amy was heavily guarded from the ground. But Jake had learned long ago that people rarely looked up. Tony, do you still have contacts at the power plant? Yeah. Why? Because it's going to get dark. In this city. Very dark. Tony grinned. I like the way you think. Jake's phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. Ready when you are? He typed back. 1 hour? Make it loud. Jake looked at Tony. Remember when we held Kepler Station against 3 alien regiments? Best day of my life, Tony replied. This is going to be better. Outside, the soldiers were setting up for a long siege. They had positioned their vehicles to block every street. They had snipers on the rooftops and guards at every exit. They were prepared for desperate veterans who would try to run or hide. They weren't prepared for what was about to happen. Jake checked his weapon and smiled. Stephen Clark was about to learn why you should never corner old soldiers who had nothing left to lose. The war he thought was over was about to begin again. And this time, the veterans weren't fighting for the government. They were fighting against it. The lights went out across the city at exactly 9 o'clock. Jake and Tony sat in the darkness of the store basement, listening to the confused voices outside. Soldiers shouting orders, radios crackling with reports, vehicles starting up. Stephen Clark's perfect operation was falling apart. Power's out in all 5 districts, Tony reported, checking his handheld radio. Your friend at the power plant came through. Jake nodded. Danny Green had been an engineer in the Marine Corps before becoming a civilian power technician. Like most veterans, he understood loyalty. Phase 1 complete, Jake said into his radio. Lisa, you're up. 3 blocks away, Captain Lisa Stone sat in the cockpit of an old cargo flyer she had borrowed from the shipping company where she worked part-time. The aircraft wasn't much to look at, but it flew. And Lisa could make anything fly. She lifted off from the warehouse district, staying low to avoid the military radar that was probably looking for her. The soldiers below had their hands full with the power outage. They weren't watching the sky. Lisa's target was the communication tower on City Hall. Take that out, and Stephen Clark's forces would lose coordination between units. She flew between the buildings, using the city's light pollution to mask her approach. But with the power out, there was no light pollution. The city was dark as space. Lisa smiled. She had flown night missions against alien positions that were much better defended than this. The communication tower appeared ahead of her. She could see soldiers on the roof, but they were looking down at the street, not up at the sky. Lisa armed the small explosive charges she had rigged to the cargo flyer's hull. Nothing fancy, just enough to bring down the tower without hurting anyone. She released the charges and pulled away. 5 seconds later, the tower collapsed in a shower of sparks. Tower down, she reported. Moving to Phase 2, back in the basement, Jake received confirmation that the communication network was damaged. Stephen Clark's soldiers were now operating, blind and deaf. Time to move, Jake told Tony. They left the store through the hidden back entrance. The street was chaos. Soldiers with flashlights running in all directions. Vehicles trying to navigate without traffic signals. Nobody was watching two men in dark clothes moving through the shadows. Jake and Tony made their way toward the detention center, where Amy was being held. The building was supposed to be heavily guarded, but half the guards had been reassigned to deal with the power outage and the communication breakdown. Just like old times, Tony whispered as they approached the building. Better, Jake replied. This time we're fighting for something that matters. They reached the outer fence of the detention center. Two guards stood at the main gate, but they were distracted by their dead radios and the darkness around them. Jake and Tony moved along the fence until they found the weak spot Jake had identified earlier, a section where the chain links were loose, probably damaged during construction and never properly fixed. They slipped through the fence and moved toward the building. According to Mike Davis's intelligence, Amy was being held on the 3rd floor. Jake looked up at the building. 3 stories, flat roof, windows on all sides. He had assaulted similar buildings on alien worlds. This one would be easier. They reached the back wall of the building. Jake pulled out a small grappling hook and rope from his pack. Tony raised an eyebrow. Where did you get that? Military surplus, Jake replied with a smile. Jake threw the hook to the roof and climbed up. Tony followed, moving quietly despite his size. On the roof, they could see the entire city spread out below them. Most of it was dark, with only a few emergency lights scattered around. Jake found the roof access door. It was locked, but Tony had brought tools for that. 30 seconds later, they were inside the building. The hallways were lit by emergency lighting, giving everything a red glow. Jake and Tony moved carefully, checking each corner. They could hear voices from below, but the building seemed mostly empty. They reached the 3rd floor and found Amy's cell. She was sitting on a small bed, still wearing her hospital uniform. When she saw them, her face lit up. About time, she said quietly. Tony worked on the lock while Jake kept watch. The lock was electronic, but the power outage had disabled it. It opened with a simple push. Are you hurt? Jake asked. No, they just wanted to ask questions. About you, about the others, about what we were planning. What did you tell them? Amy smiled. That they picked the wrong fight. They made their way back to the roof. Below, they could hear soldiers finally organizing a search of the building, but Jake, Tony, and Amy were already gone, rappelling down the back wall into the darkness. As they moved away from the detention center, Jake's radio crackled. This is Mike Davis. I've got something you need to see. They met Mike at an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. He had set up a temporary command post with computers and communication equipment. Where did you get all this? Tony asked. I never really left the intelligence business, Mike replied. I've been watching Stephen Clark for months. What did you find? Jake asked. Mike pulled up files on his computer. Clark isn't working alone. The Civilian Defense Initiative is being funded by off-world corporations. What corporations? Centauri Development Group, Proxima Mining Consortium, Vega Trade Alliance. Amy frowned. Those are alien companies. Exactly, Mike said. The same aliens we fought in the wars. They're backing Clark because they want Earth's military eliminated. Jake stared at the screen. It was starting to make sense. The aliens couldn't beat humanity in open warfare, so they were trying a different approach. They're using Clark to get rid of Earth's defenders, he said. It gets worse, Mike continued. Phase 3 of Clark's plan isn't just about eliminating veteran benefits. It's about eliminating veterans. What do you mean? Mike pulled up another file. Detention camps, medical experiments, psychological conditioning. Clark thinks veterans are too dangerous to live free in society. Tony cursed. How many people know about this? Just Clark's inner circle. Most of his people think they're helping create a peaceful society. Jake thought about Helen Brooks, Clark's assistant. She genuinely believed veterans were a threat to civilians. She had no idea she was helping alien enemies of humanity. "We need to expose this," Amy said. "How?" Tony asked. "Clark controls the media narrative. He'll say we're making it up." Jake smiled. "Then we'll have to show them instead of telling them." His radio buzzed. Lisa's voice came through. "Jake, we've got a problem. Clark's bringing in reinforcements. Military transports are landing at the airfield." Jake looked at his friends. They had rescued Amy and damaged Clark's communication network, but the real fight was just beginning. "How many reinforcements?" he asked. "Looks like a full battalion, maybe more." Jake did the math. 4 veterans against 1,000 soldiers. The odds weren't good, but Jake had faced worse odds before. At the Battle of Rigel, he had held a position with 30 Marines against 3,000 alien troops. At Vega Station, Lisa had flown solo against an entire alien fighter squadron. Tony had cleared alien bunkers with just a pistol and a grenade. They had won those battles because they were fighting for humanity's survival. They were fighting for the same thing now. "Mike, can you get this information to the public? If I can reach a broadcast station, yes." "Tony, how much equipment do we have left?" "Enough for a small war." "Amy, are there other veterans in the city who would help us?" "At least 20 that I know of, maybe more." Jake looked out the warehouse window at the city beyond. Somewhere out there, Stephen Clark was planning the final phase of his operation. He thought he had broken the veterans, scattered them, made them powerless. He was about to learn how wrong he was. "All right," Jake said. "Time to remind everyone why they shouldn't underestimate old soldiers. The real war was about to begin." Stephen Clark stood in his emergency command center, watching his perfect plan fall apart on multiple screens. The power grid was down. Communications were spotty. His detention center had been breached, and Dr. Foster was gone. Worst of all, Jake Murphy and his veterans were still free. "Sir," Helen Brooks said, running into the room with a tablet. "The reinforcements have arrived. General Morrison is requesting orders." Stephen looked at the screen showing the airfield. A full battalion of soldiers was unloading from transport ships. These weren't the local security forces he had been using. These were real military units, borrowed from the Planetary Defense Force. "Tell the general to begin a sweep of the veteran neighborhoods. I want Murphy and his people found." "Sir," Helen said quietly, "maybe we should reconsider this approach. The veterans haven't actually hurt anyone." Stephen turned to stare at her. "Haven't hurt anyone?" "They knocked out the power grid. They destroyed communication towers. They broke into a government facility. But no one was killed. They could have killed the guards, but they didn't." "That just proves how dangerous they are," Stephen replied. "They have the skills to kill, but they're holding back. That makes them unpredictable." Helen looked uncomfortable, but she nodded, and left to deliver his orders. Stephen turned back to his screens. One showed the alien funding accounts that had made his operation possible. The Centauri Development Group had been very generous, and very clear about their expectations. Earth's military veterans had to be eliminated. They were the only humans who truly understood alien warfare tactics. As long as they existed, Earth would be difficult to conquer. Stephen's phone rang. The caller ID showed an off-world number. Director Clark speaking. "Stephen, this is Ambassador Krell from the Centauri Development Group." The voice was translated from alien speech, making it sound mechanical. "We are concerned about the delays in your operation. There have been some complications, but they're under control. The veterans are still free. They are still organizing resistance. This is not control." Stephen felt sweat on his forehead. "I have a full battalion moving against them now. They'll be captured within hours. Captured is not sufficient. These humans are too dangerous to be allowed to live. I understand your concerns, but we agreed that you would eliminate the threat. How you do it is your choice. But if you fail, we will find someone else to complete the mission." The line went dead. Steven stared at the phone. The aliens weren't interested in his vision of a peaceful society. They just wanted Earth's defenders eliminated so they could move in later. But it was too late to change course now. Steven had committed himself to this path. Across the city, Jake Murphy crouched on a rooftop with Lisa Stone, watching the military convoy move through the streets below. A full battalion was more than he had expected, but it didn't change his plan. "That's a lot of soldiers," Lisa said. "It's also a lot of soldiers who don't know they're working for alien interests," Jake replied. Mike Davis had been busy overnight. Using his intelligence contacts and computer skills, he had managed to break into Stephen Clark's private files. The evidence of alien funding was now being broadcast on every emergency frequency in the city. "Think they'll believe it?" Lisa asked. "Some will, others won't. But it only takes a few to start asking questions." Jake's radio crackled. "This is Tony. I've got 20 veterans armed and ready at the warehouse district. Amy here. The hospital staff is asking questions about why I was arrested. Word is spreading." Jake smiled. Stephen Clark had made a critical mistake. He had underestimated not just the veterans, but the civilian population. Americans didn't like seeing their heroes arrested without cause. "Mike, what's the status on the broadcast? Information is out on all channels. Major news networks are starting to pick it up. The alien funding evidence is solid." Jake watched the convoy below. The soldiers looked professional and well-equipped, but they also looked confused. Their radios were probably full of contradictory orders and disturbing rumors. "All right, everyone. Time for the final phase. Lisa, you know what to do." Lisa nodded and moved toward the aircraft she had hidden on the rooftop. It was an old military transport, technically retired, but still airworthy. She had borrowed it from a storage facility. "Jake," she said, before climbing into the cockpit, "if this goes wrong, it won't go wrong. We're not the same people who let Stephen Clark push us around. We're the people who saved humanity." Lisa grinned and started the engines. Jake made his way down to street level, where Tony and Amy were waiting with the other veterans. 20 men and women who had fought across the galaxy now stood ready to fight for their own home. "Remember," Jake told them, "we're not trying to hurt anyone. We're trying to save them. Those soldiers down there are Americans just like us. They're being lied to." The group moved out, using their knowledge of urban warfare to position themselves around the convoy. But instead of attacking, they did something the soldiers weren't expecting. They started talking to them. "Sergeant Martinez," Tony called out to one of the squad leaders. "You served in the Vega campaign, didn't you?" The sergeant looked surprised. "How did you know that?" "Because I was there too. 2nd Battalion, Echo Company. You probably saved my life at least twice." Similar conversations were happening all along the convoy. Veterans recognizing soldiers they had served with. Soldiers realizing they were being ordered to arrest the same people who had trained them and fought beside them. Jake approached the convoy commander, a young captain who looked barely old enough to have served in the later stages of the wars. "Captain Williams," Jake said, reading the name tag. "I'm Colonel Jake Murphy." The captain's eyes widened. "Sir, I studied your tactics at the academy. The Battle of Kepler Station is required reading. Then you know I've never lied to my people. So believe me when I tell you that Director Clark is working with alien interests to eliminate Earth's defenders." Jake handed the captain a tablet showing Mike's evidence. Bank records, communication intercepts, alien funding sources. Captain Williams read for several minutes. His face grew pale. "This can't be real," he said. "It's real, Captain. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Above them, Lisa's aircraft appeared, broadcasting Mike's evidence on all frequencies. The proof of alien involvement was now being heard by every military unit in the city. Jake's radio crackled with reports from across the city. Military units were stopping their advance. Soldiers were refusing orders. Some were actively switching sides. Stephen Clark's voice came over the emergency channels. "This is Director Clark. The evidence being broadcast is fabricated. The veterans are using alien technology to create false information. But it was too late. Too many people had seen the proof. Too many soldiers remembered the veterans who had trained them and led them in battle." General Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. "All units, stand down. I'm ordering a full investigation of the Civilian Defense Initiative." Jake smiled. Stephen Clark had made his final mistake. He had assumed that soldiers would blindly follow orders, even orders to attack their own heroes. At his command center, Stephen Clark watched his operation collapse. Half his forces had defected. The other half was demanding explanations. The alien funding had been exposed, and government investigators were already on their way. "Sir," Helen Brooks said, "maybe we should surrender. This isn't what we signed up for." Stephen looked at her, young, idealistic, believing she was helping create a better world. She had no idea what the aliens would do to Earth once its defenders were gone. "Helen," he said quietly, "I'm sorry." Stephen activated the emergency protocol he had hoped never to use. Hidden throughout the city were alien devices, provided by his off-world sponsors. Weapons designed to eliminate large numbers of humans quickly and quietly. If he couldn't eliminate the veterans through legal means, he would use alien technology to finish the job. Jake was talking to Captain Williams when his radio exploded, with warnings from Mike Davis. "Jake, get everyone out of there." Clark's activated some kind of alien weapons network. Around the city, strange devices began emerging from hidden locations. Alien technology that had been smuggled in over months, disguised as civilian equipment. But as the devices powered up, something unexpected happened. They began shutting down one by one. "Mike, what's happening?" Jake asked. "The aliens made a mistake," Mike replied, his voice excited. "They used the same technology we captured during the wars. Amy and I know how to disable it." Dr. Amy Foster had spent years studying alien medical technology, learning how their systems worked. That knowledge was now being used to turn their own weapons against them. Within an hour, every alien device in the city was disabled. Stephen Clark's final gambit had failed. As dawn broke over the city, Jake Murphy stood on the steps of City Hall with his fellow veterans. Around them, soldiers and civilians worked together to clean up the damage from the night's events. Stephen Clark was in custody, along with evidence of his alien connections. The Civilian Defense Initiative had been disbanded. Most importantly, the truth about the alien conspiracy was now public knowledge. "So what happens now?" Lisa asked. Jake looked out at the city. People were going back to their normal lives, but they would never again take their defenders for granted. "Now we do what we've always done," he said. "We stand ready." President Hayes appeared on every screen in the city, announcing the restoration of veteran benefits and the creation of a new Veteran Defense Council. Jake Murphy was named as its first director. Amy Foster was appointed head of Veterans Affairs. Lisa Stone became commander of the new Aerospace Defense Squadron. Tony Rodriguez took charge of training the next generation of defenders. Mike Davis was put in charge of counterintelligence, tasked with preventing future alien infiltration. 5 years later, when the next alien threat appeared at the edge of the solar system, Earth was ready. The veterans who had been dismissed as broken relics were once again standing guard over humanity, and this time, everyone remembered why they should never underestimate the warriors who had fought 1,000 wars and won them all.